anxiety like you would not believe. I think about violence all the time.
In a fitness industry built on hype, half-truths, and hidden agendas, scandals are nothing new. But few have rocked the space like this one. Mike Israetel, once praised as a genius with an IQ north of 160, a PhD in sports science, and a reputation for brutal honesty, is now facing the kind of scrutiny no influencer escapes from clean. From claims of academic brilliance to the destruction of the very documents that earned him his PhD. This is the story of how ego and ambition may have brought down one of fitness's most respected voices. If you've been in the online fitness space anytime in the past few years, chances are you've run into Mike Israetel. Bald, jacked, insanely smart, and not afraid to remind you of it. Mike's been a dominant voice in evidence-based training for nearly a decade. He's the guy who will break down muscle growth with a whiteboard, throw a few insults in for good measure, and somehow still keep you watching for an hour. But before all the viral debates, scientific rants, and podcast wars, Mike was just another kid with big ideas. To understand how he got here, why so many people either swear by him or can't stand him, we need to look at where it all started. Mike's story doesn't start with YouTube or viral debates. It starts in the classroom. He started with a degree in kinesiology from the University of Michigan, followed it up with a master's in exercise science from Appalachian State, and then set his sights on something bigger, a PhD in sports physiology from East Tennessee State. 3 years later, he finished his dissertation, The Interrelationships of Fitness Characteristics in Division I Athletes, the kind of research that compares sprint speed and vertical jump height across 80 D1 athletes, broken down by sport. In 2013, Mike earned his doctorate. On paper, he was now the real deal. And it paid off. He went on to teach at Temple University and the University of Central Missouri, leading courses in sports and exercise science. He could have stayed on that track, but Mike had bigger dreams. So he co-founded Renaissance Periodization, or RP, an online coaching company built around one promise: no hype, no BS, just science-backed training and nutrition. To promote the brand, Mike started a YouTube channel. At first, it was basic, generic workout videos, lifting clips, the usual. But as the audience grew, Mike leaned into what made him different: his brain. He started breaking down complex training concepts in simple visual ways: hypertrophy, volume landmarks, training frequency, using diagrams, science, and just enough sarcasm to keep people watching. For a lot of people sick of fitness influencers selling waist trainers and fake natty dreams, Mike was a breath of fresh air. The channel exploded, gaining over 3 million subscribers. His lectures felt like part university class, part stand-up routine. He wasn't just a guy who looked the part. He could explain it, defend it, and debate it better than anyone else. From the start, Mike wasn't just selling programs or pushing supplements. He was selling certainty. And a big part of that came down to how he framed himself: the smartest guy in the room. He claimed to be stronger and bigger than some of the best bodybuilders in history.
Who am I compared to Mike Mentzer? Well, I'm bigger and stronger than Mike Mentzer. And Mike Mentzer was impressive for his time, but he wasn't impressive in an absolute sense.
Yeah.
Did he have some kind of insight that the rest of us didn't? I'll tell you right now, the answer is no.
He talked about having an IQ over 160, not once, but often.
My IQ is above 160. We don't know how high because they don't do standardized IQ tests above that.
Also, he made it very clear he had a PhD and you didn't.
I got a PhD in sport physiology.
And in a space where most influencers can't explain the difference between volume and intensity, that kind of confidence hit different. His academic background combined with his aggressive, over-the-top personality made him stand out in every room. And soon, that room got a lot bigger. He started getting invited onto some of the biggest podcasts in the fitness space. He published multiple books, helped build the RP Strength brand into an empire, and even launched a fitness app. But with popularity comes pressure. And Mike's personality didn't exactly play well with everyone. The same intensity that made him stand out started to rub people the wrong way. The turning point didn't start with a fake credential or a deleted dissertation. It started with a debate. In late 2019, Greg Doucette, another massive voice in the YouTube fitness space, posted a video criticizing Jeff Nippard's science-based training approach.
How many sets should you do in a workout? Is it 10, 20, 30, and is it 3 times a week, 2 times a week? What's the minimum effective volume? What is the max intensity? What is RPE? Stop all the scientific mumbo jumbo. Train harder.
While the video didn't mention Mike directly, the overlap was obvious. So when Mike was asked about it, he didn't hold back. He gave his usual no-nonsense take.
I'm pretty sure I saw the entire video by Greg. He never actually answers the question of how much. He just says, go harder, and he yells a lot, which is funny. But it's precious little to learn from that other than go hard.
Greg responded with a full video of his own, calling out Mike's comments as misleading. He argued that they could cause beginners to train less intensely than they should, mistaking volume for laziness.
Most of my audience watching are not training hard enough. I'm not saying go to failure in every set and beyond like me. I'm saying train harder than you did last time. He can talk with his scientific every term, and I understand them all. And you can watch his videos, and 5% of you will understand what he's saying and do it. The other 95% won't not understand what they mean. Minimum effect.
Mike, confident as ever, agreed to a face-to-face debate, but it did not go how he expected. Greg showed up calm, patient, and prepared, a sharp contrast to his usual loud, over-the-top delivery. Mike, on the other hand, came across visibly annoyed, even disinterested. He was caught yawning mid-discussion and seemed more irritated than engaged. They disagreed on everything, but what stood out wasn't the argument. It was Mike's demeanor.
Do you think the person that listens to your channel is the average person, or is that someone that sought you out because they know what you're talking about training and probably knows a little bit about training and cares enough about it to figure out how their biceps work? I mean, they're watching 30-minute long YouTube videos.
They don't know. I would say half of them are morons.
Okay, but you seem to have an interesting, very low opinion of your viewership. Do they know that?
For the first time, people saw cracks in the armor. A PhD who couldn't defend his points without condescension. Viewers overwhelmingly agreed with Greg. It should have blown over in no time, but it didn't, because the downward spiral was just getting started. In 2023, Mike announced he was returning to competitive bodybuilding to chase an IFBB pro card. A big move, and a risky one. Everyone knew what that meant: steroids. And while Mike had always been open about PED use in the sport, fans expected that of all people, he would know how to do it smart and safely.
I'm on contest prep. I'm on a considerable dose of anabolics. I go work out every morning and I look at the pond and the trees and I'm like all I feel is rage and frustration. I wake up in the morning afraid of the rest of my day.
Greg picked up the story again, uploading videos practically begging Mike to stop, warning him about long-term health damage, especially as he pushed into his 40s.
What this is a sign of is some form of a chronic illness. This is not good. It's not healthy. And somebody with all of these health markers combined probably shouldn't be competing. Why is Mike risking his health, risking his life in order to get up on stage?
Mike didn't back down. But when he finally stepped on stage in mid-2024, things didn't go as planned. He performed poorly, reportedly due to, of all things, a bad tan. That excuse became meme fuel almost instantly. Greg roasted him again.
It wasn't the 10. If you're soft, if you have 10 pounds to lose, 10 can't offset that. The reason you didn't win is you weren't peeled to the bone.
Comment sections piled on. Suddenly, the man who had spent a decade building a brand on discipline, detail, and elite-level thinking looked unprepared. That's when the questions started creeping in. If Mike was this careless with his prep, what else had he been careless about? By the end of 2024, Mike wasn't just defending his ideas anymore, he was defending himself. After his failed bodybuilding comeback and public clashes with Greg Doucette, he sat down for an interview with Zach Tander, titled, Why Mike Israetel Hates Greg Doucette.
They had a debate back in the day on Omar Isuf's channel with Greg Doucette, who is a two-faced, lying sociopath sucker.
What started as a takedown turned into a turning point. Mike claimed Greg had tricked him during their debate, made him look bad on purpose.
He talked mad shit in his videos with his fake voice about how stupid I was and how wrong I was about volume or whatever it was about. And I was like, oh, this guy wants a shot at the title. So when we got face to face in a debate, I mirrored that energy. And he turned off his parrot voice and went straight into nice guy agreeable mode. And almost all the comments were like, oh my God, this Mike guy's a asshole. And this Greg guy just came to the conversation to try to learn. No, he didn't. He's trying to learn shit. He's like just totally two-faced.
And while some of his fans cheered him on, something had clearly shifted. He began positioning himself not just as an expert, but as the expert, dismissing other coaches outright, bragging about how no one else came close to his level of knowledge.
I'm both on a raw IQ scale smarter than almost every coach, maybe every coach, and becomes very maniacally fun for me to resist the coach's demands and be very cynical and skeptical when they ask me to do things. And so that when I ask them questions, but why did you say this and why not this? It becomes pleasant for me to watch them intellectually break down and be unable to justify anything.
For some viewers, it was just Mike being Mike, but for others, even longtime supporters, the tone had changed. The certainty that had once made him credible now felt like arrogance, and the cracks started showing in his own comment section. And when someone builds their brand around being the smartest guy in the room, that kind of energy eventually invites one question. Is he really as smart as he says he is? That question exploded on September 29th, 2025. That's when a YouTuber named Solomon Nelson dropped a video titled, Mike Israetel's PhD, the biggest academic sham in fitness.
So naturally, when I got my hands on Mike Israetel's PhD thesis, I expected a masterwork, an intellectual tour de force. Instead,
I am a perfectionist asshole with a PhD. Yeah, hell yeah, that's why I say shit like that.
Dr. Mike, geez, that's a big deal. And I've noticed that carries a lot of weight. Like all I feel is rage and frustration.
What I got was a document so sloppy, shallow, and confused, it could only pass in a system that had already failed.
It was long, brutally detailed, and damning. Solomon didn't just critique Mike's research, he dissected it page by page. He pointed out major problems, no original contribution to the field.
The stated goal of Mike's thesis was to explore interrelationships among fitness variables that he claimed were less clear in the existing literature. However, the core findings, that stronger athletes are more muscular and powerful, that more powerful athletes jump higher and sprint faster, and that leaner athletes perform better in these tasks, are not only unsurprising, but also extensively documented in prior research, even by 2013.
Sloppy formatting.
A doctoral thesis isn't evaluated just on the originality or significance of its content, but also the clarity and accuracy with which that content is presented. Mike Israetel's thesis fails comprehensively on this front. Across the thesis, Mike presents impossible and contradictory data, inflates simple points with jargon, and allows hundreds of basic grammatical, typographical, and formatting errors to remain uncorrected.
Tables filled with obvious data entry errors.
Tables 4.6 and 4.7 report that for the 20 lowest performers, the mean body masses were 73.9 kilos and 75.3 kilos respectively, with standard deviations of 71.8 kilos, virtually equal to the means themselves. This is a statistical absurdity. Standard deviation measures the spread of the data around the mean. A standard deviation this large, relative to the mean, is nonsensical in a biological context. It would mean that roughly 1/3 of the lowest performing athletes in Table 4.6 had a body mass either greater than 145.7 kilos or less than 2.1 kilos, the weight of a newborn. These are numbers so fundamentally wrong that they could only result from incompetent data entry, which is exactly what's happened here. Mike appears to have simply copied the mean figures of the highest performers and pasted them as the standard deviations of the lowest performers. To have made this mistake just once would be damning enough. But Mike makes this exact same error in 3 separate tables. These mistakes invalidate the entire tables and any conclusions drawn from them.
Typos, copy-pasted paragraphs, and even duplicated sections.
The methods section, in chapters 4 and 5, and near verbatim clones of those in Chapter 3, reproducing the exact same typos, the exact same formatting mistakes, and the exact same structural oversights, of which there are many. Mike doesn't just copy-paste across chapters, he even does it within them. On page 74, the exact same passage appears twice in a row, verbatim. This pattern of duplication and error isn't just a sign of laziness. It raises serious doubts about whether much of the thesis was meaningfully reviewed at all. Basic spelling errors are everywhere. Mike misspells the word vertical as vetical or vetrical, individual as invididual, properties as propertites, biomechanics as biomechanins, neural as neural, training as traininiger, science as sense, as already noted, and exercise as exercise or exercise. Perhaps the most common mechanical failure in the thesis is Mike's inability or refusal to press the spacebar. Missing spaces between words and after punctuation are so frequent, it's as if the spacebar was rationed. They're everywhere, and by the time you encounter the 100th instance, you're no longer wondering how they slipped through.
Citations used incorrectly or out of order.
On page 96, Mike claims to summarize the results of an investigation as illustrated in Table 3.4. However, a quick glance at Table 3.4, located on page 46, reveals a complete disconnect between the text and the table it purports to describe. The text on page 96 discusses a comparison of athletes based on their lean body mass, 2% fat ratio, but Table 3.4 presents anthropometric data for athletes grouped by their performance in the allometrically scaled isometric mid-thigh pull.
Solomon argued that the thesis didn't just lack depth, it barely met the minimum standards of academic writing.
In summary, Mike's thesis can't be said to be careful, rigorous, cohesive, or original. It fails to meet the basic standards of doctoral scholarship.
And worst of all, Mike himself cited multiple studies that had already proven the exact same conclusions he presented as new.
You don't have to take it from me. Just listen to Mike himself, who openly concedes this throughout the document. For instance, in Chapter 3, Mike explicitly notes that the finding that stronger athletes produce higher rates of force development has been previously well supported in the literature, and that the finding of higher power generating abilities being associated with stronger athletes is well supported by previous data.
For someone who built a career criticizing bro science, this was academic malpractice, but it got worse. Instead of addressing the controversy directly, Mike restricted public access to his thesis, locking it behind East Tennessee State's internal system, viewable only by students and alumni. Then he claimed that Solomon had reviewed an early draft, not the final version. But he didn't post this explanation on his own channel. He showed up on Dr. Milo Wool's channel, a close friend, in a video called Dr. Mike Responds: The Truth About His PhD.
And so the PhD isn't some kind of proof of your superiority. It is step one in an academic research career, which most people don't even end up taking. That's my PhD. It's a mediocre step one to giving me a PhD, and not much more than that. Never claimed that it was much more than that. We now know Solomon was looking at an accidentally uploaded incorrect rough draft. So I'll say this, I don't blame him for going hard on it, because he has every reasonable idea to think this was the final draft. It wasn't. I guess technically I submitted the wrong draft to the graduate school.
He admitted to uploading the wrong draft to the university's database, which he claimed was the source of the errors people were pointing out. But instead of cleaning things up, the explanation raised more questions than it answered. Milo backed him up, downplayed the errors, and suggested that Solomon wasn't exactly an unbiased critic.
He built an entire 70-minute takedown video around the claim that Mike's dissertation was fraudulent, that his PhD should be revoked, and that the entire academic system had failed. In my view, it comes across more like a hit piece than an unbiased critique. To date, Solomon has made more than 10 videos about Mike. That's over 13 hours of content. A quick look at his views on videos where he features Mike versus his non-Mike content shows an enormous discrepancy in his views. When one person becomes your channel's most reliable source of outrage, views, and income, it raises the question of motive.
But the internet wasn't buying it. It didn't take long for viewers to notice inconsistencies in their story. The so-called final version Milo shared was dated March 2013, while the version Solomon reviewed, supposedly the rough draft, was dated August 2013. From there, things only got worse. Mike and Milo tried to laugh it off. They downplayed the importance of the PhD altogether.
The vast majority of dissertations are actually designed to be relatively simple and straightforward so that you can get experience in the throes of research with the guidance of your supervisor. It is actually the advice of Doc Stone and very many other folks in PIA who are professional principal investigators and dissertation committee chairs. They say, don't try to conquer the world with your PhD. If you do a project that's very well scoped, straightforward, once you get that done, then if you like it, you get your PhD, you can do all the research in the world after that.
Mike called the mistakes clerical errors. Just a few formatting issues, a misplaced negative sign, some copy-paste mishaps. But after years of holding everyone else to a higher standard, this didn't sit well with people. When Mike finally acknowledged in writing that Solomon had reviewed the correct version of the dissertation, it was too late. The damage was done. The audience had already made up its mind. And yet, something strange happened. Mike's YouTube channel didn't lose subscribers, it gained them. His main audience barely flinched. By avoiding the controversy on his own platform and pushing the discussion onto smaller channels, he may have insulated his brand just enough to ride out the storm. Some viewers dismissed it as internet drama, others just didn't care. In a space where most influencers don't even have a college degree, Mike still looked like an expert. But the trust? That's another story. For years, Mike built his reputation on being the most credible guy in the room. The guy who could outthink, out-explain, and out-science anyone. That reputation now has a permanent asterisk, because when it came time to own his mistakes, he didn't.